Hallo und herzlich willkommen. Ich freue mich, Sie heute zu unserer Präsentation über Ihram Restrictions begrüßen zu dürfen. Mein Name ist Ihram, und ich werde Sie durch dieses Thema führen. Auf dieser ersten Folie sehen Sie den Titel, Ihram Restrictions. Also die wichtigsten Regeln und Beschränkungen während des Ihrams. Wir werden uns heute anschauen, was während des Ihrams erlaubt ist und was nicht. Ihr Pilgereis so reibungslos wie möglich zu gestalten. Lassen Sie uns also on weiter Zergern starten. On this slide, we focus on the restrictions in Ihram according to the Hanafi school. First, it's important to understand that when in Ihram, a pilgrim must abstain from certain behaviors, starting with avoiding obscenity. This means refraining from any form of wickedness, such as sins, prohibited actions, foul language, and arguments. It's about maintaining a pure and respectful state of mind and conduct. Next, there's a prohibition against hunting or helping someone hunt. This is a clear restriction to preserve the sanctity of the sacred state. Now, regarding clothing, men should avoid wearing trousers, turbans, or boots while in Ihram. However, if sandals are unavailable, they are allowed to wear boots, but only if they are cut down to a specific point called the cab. This is the part at the rising joint in the middle of the foot. Lastly, men are advised not to cover their face and head during Ihram, emphasizing simplicity and humility. These restrictions are designed to foster a sense of purity, humility, and focus during the pilgrimage. They remind us that Ihram is not just a physical state, but also a spiritual one, guiding us to behave ethically and humbly throughout this sacred journey. Let's discuss some of the restrictions in Ihram for women, specifically from the Hanafi perspective. First, it's important to note that women should not cover their faces while in Ihram. This is a key point because covering the face is generally discouraged during this sacred state. Next, women are not allowed to apply oils or shave their hair or any bodily hair. Additionally, trimming the beard is also not permitted. These restrictions help maintain the humility and simplicity that Ihram symbolizes. Moving on, clothing choices are also regulated. Women should avoid wearing clothing dyed with waras, which is yellow dye, saffron, or safflower. But there's a condition. If the dye cannot be removed through washing, then wearing such clothing might be permissible. It's about ensuring simplicity and avoiding unnecessary adornment. Now, it's good to know that, despite these restrictions, there are some allowances. For example, you are allowed to shower or bathe while in Ihram, which is important for comfort and hygiene. Also, women are permitted to tie a money belt around the waist, which can be practical for carrying essentials. All these restrictions and allowances are designed to focus us on humility, equality, and devotion during this sacred journey. They remind us to keep our intentions pure and our conduct modest throughout the pilgrimage. On this slide, let's talk about some of the restrictions in Ihram according to Maliki jurisprudence. First, it's important to understand that while many prohibitions are in place, there are also allowances for protecting life. For example, there is no harm in killing animals that are harmful or dangerous, such as lions, dogs, snakes, rats, or even certain birds, if they pose a threat. Next, when it comes to personal conduct, avoiding any form of pleasure related to intimacy is essential. This means refraining from intercourse, as well as from kissing or embracing. Interestingly, if semen is emitted without pleasure, say, accidentally, it does not invalidate Ihram. But of course, intentionally engaging in such acts would be problematic. Another key point is that wearing perfume is prohibited, which is part of maintaining the state of Ihram. For men, wearing stitched clothes is not allowed either, emphasizing simplicity and humility during this sacred state. Finally, hunting is strictly forbidden during Ihram. This restriction helps maintain the sanctity of the pilgrimage and keeps our focus on spiritual devotion. All these rules are designed to foster humility, focus, and respect for the sacred journey we are undertaking. On this slide, we're looking at some of the restrictions in Ihram according to Maliki school. First, it's important to remember that you cannot kill or remove lice from your hair or body while in Ihram. This is a clear restriction to maintain the state of purity. For men, there's a rule that they should not cover their heads during Ihram. If a man needs to shave or cover an injury, he must offer a sacrifice as a form of compensation. Women, however, are expected to follow similar rules regarding not killing lice or engaging in sexual activity. The key difference is that women are allowed to wear stitched clothes, which helps them maintain modesty. But they should not uncover their heads. Covering the head is part of their Ihram restrictions. Additionally, women should not cover their faces or hands, ensuring they stay within the boundaries of Ihram requirements. They are permitted to wear cuffs, special socks, or footwear while in Ihram, but men are not allowed to wear cuffs at all. If a man does wear them, he must cut them below the ankles as a specific requirement. These rules are designed to keep the state of Ihram pure and focused on humility and devotion. Understanding these restrictions helps us stay mindful of the spiritual significance of the Ihram journey. On this slide, we focus on the restrictions in Ihram according to the Shafi school. First, no stitched garments are allowed, including trousers or cuff, even if the cloths are woven together. It's important to note that tying with string or using pins is also not permitted for stitching. However, you can tie a string to the ends of the cloth and then tie the strings together, which is acceptable. You may also fasten the cloths with safety pins or tie a string over it, and adding a waist belt to hold the garment is permitted as well. Next, regarding scents, perfume is strictly forbidden during Ihram, and it's unlawful to even smell flowers. Applying unscented oils, like olive oil, to the beard or scalp is generally not allowed, unless you are bald, in which case you can apply it directly to the skin. Be cautious with any food or drinks that have a strong cosmetic taste, smell, or color, such as saffron or rose water, as these are not permitted. Lastly, scented deodorants or eyeliners are also not allowed. These restrictions help maintain the sanctity and humility of the Ihram state, aligning with the overall theme of purity and focus during this sacred journey. Today, I'll be discussing some important restrictions in Ihram according to the Shafi school. First, let's talk about cutting or plucking hair. If you do this, you need to perform an expiation, which is calculated based on the number of hairs pulled. For example, if you pull out one hair, you owe about half a liter of food as expiation. If you pull out 2 hairs, it's double that amount, and for 3 or more hairs, a full expiation is required. It's also important to remember that you should not comb or run your fingers through your beard during Ihram, as this is also prohibited. Next, we have the restriction on clipping nails. Clipping or cutting nails while in Ihram is not allowed, and violating this rule also requires expiation. Moving on, sexual intercourse or even foreplay is strictly forbidden during Ihram. If someone intentionally engages in sexual intercourse, it invalidates the Hajj, and they must perform a makeup Hajj. However, it's important to note that they should still continue performing the rites and offer a sacrifice. Additionally, hunting or killing animals is generally prohibited while in Ihram, but it's permissible to kill harmful insects like lice or other pests to protect yourself. Lastly, it's forbidden to marry or get engaged while in Ihram. These restrictions are all part of maintaining the sanctity and focus during this sacred state, and understanding them helps us fulfill our duties properly and respectfully during Hajj. Now, let's discuss the restrictions in Ihram according to the Hanbali school. First, it is important to note that you should not shave your hair or clip your nails during this sacred state. This is one of the key prohibitions to maintain purity and humility. Next, regarding clothing, stitched clothes are generally not allowed. However, if you cannot find unstitched cloth or if you are wearing sandals, you are permitted to wear stitched clothes and shoes without offering any expiation. Another important point is that covering the head, including the ears, is not allowed because the ears are considered part of the head. This highlights the importance of maintaining the natural state of the body during Ihram. In addition, you must avoid applying perfume to your body or clothes. Fragrances are considered a form of adornment that should be avoided during Ihram to preserve its spiritual purity. Hunting is also prohibited. You cannot hunt wild animals for food, but killing domestic animals or sea creatures is permissible. This restriction emphasizes respect for living creatures and the sanctity of the state of Ihram. Understanding these restrictions helps us appreciate the humility and discipline required during this sacred journey, aligning our actions with the overall theme of devotion and reverence in the pilgrimage. Now, let's discuss some of the restrictions in Ihram according to the Hanbali school. First, contracting marriages is considered unlawful during Ihram, but there's no requirement for a sacrifice in this case. Moving on, if someone engages in sexual contact without actual intercourse, such as ejaculation resulting from that contact, it means they should offer a sacrifice. However, it's important to note that such an act does not invalidate the Hajj itself. If intercourse does occur, it invalidates the pilgrimage, and the person must complete the Hajj, make it up later, and also offer a sacrifice. These rules are generally the same for both men and women. The key difference is that women are allowed to wear stitched clothes and are not permitted to cover their faces. Understanding these restrictions helps us stay within the bounds of Ihram and ensures the validity of our pilgrimage, aligning with the overall theme of observing proper conduct during this sacred journey. Het sprechen wir über die Einschränkungen beim Tragen von Geniten Kleidern während des Ihram. Ibn Umar, R.A. berichtet, dass der Gesant alles, Letter FDFA Gefrecht word, was ein Person im Zustand des Ihram tragen darf. Antwortet, das jemand im Ihram kein Genet hemd, keinen Turban, kein Hosen, keinen Umhang mit Kapus, kein Schuh oder Genet Sandalen, die Kuf Genet werden tragen darf. Sei den, jemand kann kein ungeknüpft Sandal finden. Dan darf Senkuf oder Schuh tragen, vorausgesetzt, schneidet sei unterhalb der Nurchel ab. Außerdem ist verboten, Kleider zu tragen, die mit angenehmem Duft wie Safran gefärbt sind. Dies Anweisungen sind bestätigt und stammen aus einer Überlieferung von Muslim. Zusammenfassend, der Grund für dies Einschränkungen ist, damit zu zeigen und sich auf das spiritual Ziel der Pilgerfahrt zu konzentrieren. Today, I will talk about some important restrictions regarding stitched clothes during Ihram. According to Abd Allah bin Umar, he heard the Prophet Muhammad letter FDFA forbidding women in the sacred state from wearing gloves and veils that cover their faces. He also mentioned that women should avoid wearing clothes dyed with waras or saffron. These specific restrictions are meant to maintain the sanctity and humility during Ihram. However, it's important to note that after completing certain rites, women are allowed to wear any type of clothing they like. This includes yellow-dyed clothes, silk, jewelry, trousers, shirts, or shoes. The restrictions are specific to the state of Ihram, and they aim to preserve humility and focus during this sacred time. Additionally, Abu Dawud reports that Abda and Mohammed bin Ishaq narrated this tradition from Mohammed bin Ishaq, but they did not mention the part about wearing dyed clothes afterward. Overall, these restrictions highlight the importance of modesty and simplicity during Ihram, but also show that there is flexibility once the sacred rites are completed. This connects to the broader theme of maintaining humility and reverence during our pilgrimage. Today, I want to highlight an interesting aspect of the Ihram restrictions related to perfume. Aisha, RAA, narrated that she used to apply perfume to the Prophet, letter FDFA, at specific times, when he was preparing to enter the state of Ihram, before he put on his Ihram garments. This shows that before entering Ihram, applying perfume was permissible. Additionally, she mentioned that she also applied perfume to him again when he finished his state of Ihram, but before he performed the tawaf around the Kaaba. This indicates that, at least in the Prophet's practice, there was a distinction between the restrictions during Ihram and the actions he took outside of those restrictions. This narration, which is agreed upon, highlights how the restrictions on perfume are specific to the state of Ihram, but there are times when applying perfume was still acceptable before or after that state. Understanding this helps us see that while Ihram has certain restrictions, there are nuances and exceptions, especially when it comes to preparing oneself for the sacred acts of pilgrimage. It underscores the importance of following the Prophet's example and understanding the context of these rules. On this slide, we see an interesting example related to Ihram restrictions, specifically concerning hunting. The story is narrated by Abdullah B. Abu Qatada, who reports on an incident involving the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Prophet set out for pilgrimage, and his companions accompanied him. Among them was Abu Qatada, who had not yet entered the state of Ihram. The Prophet instructed the group to proceed along the coastline until he met them. As they traveled, they encountered a wild ass. Abu Qatada, acting on his own, attacked the animal and cut off its hind legs. They then ate its meat, which is significant because eating game while in the state of Ihram is generally prohibited. When they reached the Prophet, they explained what had happened, that they ate the meat of a wild animal while in Ihram, but Abu Qatada had not been in Ihram at the time. They also carried the leftover meat to show the Prophet. The Prophet asked if anyone had instructed Abu Qatada to hunt or pointed him toward the animal. When they said no, he told them to eat what was left of the meat. This story highlights an important point. If no one commanded or directed the hunting, then it is permissible to eat the meat of game that was hunted accidentally or without explicit permission during Ihram. It connects to the overall theme of Ihram restrictions, showing that certain actions, like hunting, are generally forbidden, but exceptions exist if no one explicitly authorized or directed such actions. Understanding these nuances helps us grasp the balance between the rules of Ihram and practical situations that may arise during pilgrimage. Today, we're discussing some important restrictions that apply during the state of Ihram, specifically related to marriage and engagement. Uthman bin Affan, RAA, narrated that the Messenger of Allah, letter FDFA, emphasized that a muhrim, someone in the sacred state of Ihram, must not engage in marriage or even help others do so. This includes not contracting a marriage, assisting in arranging one, or getting engaged to someone. The key idea here is that during Ihram, certain personal and social activities, especially those related to marriage, are prohibited. This restriction helps us focus on the spiritual goals of Hajj and Umrah, emphasizing humility and devotion. It's a reminder of the state of consecration we enter, which requires us to avoid worldly distractions like marriage negotiations and engagements. These rules are rooted in the teachings of the Prophet, letter FDFA, and serve to maintain the sanctity and purity of the pilgrimage experience. So, as we move through this journey, it's vital to remember these guidelines and keep our focus on worship and spiritual reflection. In diesem, Abschnitt sprechen wir über die Einschränkungen für Ihram, insbesondere in Bezug auf sexual Beziehungen während der Umrah. Ich möchte euch ein Begebenheit schildern, in der wir eben, gefragt haben. Darf ein Mann vor dem Tawaf zwischen Safa und Marwa sexual Beziehungen zu seiner Frau haben? Sen Antwort war, das alles Gesenter, Fried sei mit einem nach Mekka kam, den Kaaba siebenmal umkreist, dan zwei Rakets hinter Makam Ibrahim verrichtet, und anschließend den Tawaf zwischen Safa und Marwa absolviert. Ibn, betont dabei, das man in alles Gesenten ein vorbildliches Beispiel findet. Dan fragt ich Jabir bin, Abdullah die gleich frage, und sagt klar, das man vor dem Tawaf kein sexuellen Beziehungen haben sollt. Das bedeutet, das während der Umrah, vor dem Abschluss des Tawafs zwischen Safa und Marwa, sexual Beziehungen verboten sind. Wichtig ist auch zu wissen, dass dieses Verbot nach dem sei, also dem Lauf zwischen Safa und Marwa, aufgehoben wird. Dieses Verbot gilt, also nur für die Umrah während der Zeit, solange der Tawaf noch nicht beendet ist. Damit sehen wir, wie die Ritualen Vorschriften unser Verhalten leiten, und die Bedeutung des Respekts für die heiligen Handlungen unterstreichen. Today, I want to talk about the restrictions related to combing hair during Ihram, as highlighted in the story of Aisha. She narrates that she and others set out with the Prophet Muhammad, letter FDFA, just before the new moon of Dhil Hijjah. The Prophet gave clear instructions. Anyone wishing to assume Ihram for Umrah could do so, and those for Hajj could do so as well. He also mentioned that if he hadn't brought the Hadi with him, he would have assumed Ihram for Umrah. This meant that some people chose to assume Ihram for Umrah, while others for Hajj. Aisha was among those who initially assumed Ihram for Umrah. However, she experienced menstruation before entering Mecca and remained menstruating until the day of Arafat. She then complained to the Prophet about her situation, and he advised her to abandon her Umrah, undo and comb her hair, and assume Ihram for Hajj. She followed his advice, which shows the flexibility and compassion in the rules. Later, on the night of Hasba, the Prophet sent Abdur Rahman with her to At-Tan'im, where she assumed Ihram for Umrah again. The key point here is that, during this process, the prohibition on combing hair was lifted after the sa'i, but only applies to Umrah. Aisha was able to complete her Hajj and Umrah without any obligation for hadi, charity, or fasting, showing that certain restrictions can be relaxed based on circumstances. This story illustrates how the rules are adaptable and emphasizes the importance of understanding the details of Ihram restrictions, especially concerning actions like combing hair. Hutsprechen were über ein Wichtig Einschränkung für den Ihram, nämlich des Kämmen der Haar. Laut Almasa al-Fiqhiyya, des heißt des islamisch Rechtslexikon, gibt es hierer ein klare Regel. Wenn der Pilger sicher ist, das beim Kämmen Haar ausfallen würden, dann sind die Geliaten sich einig, dass das Kämmen in diesem Fall verboten ist. Das bedeutet, es besteht keinen Unterschied in der Meinung der Geliaten, wenn es die Gefahr des Haarverlusts geht. Das ist ein entscheidender Punkt, weil es zeigt, dass die Absicht und die Vorsicht beim Einhalten der Ihram-Regeln sehr wichtig sind. Wenn man also weiß, dass das Kämmen Haar verlieren könnt, sollte man auf dies Aktivität verzichten, den Vorschriften zu entsprechen. Dies Regel unterstreicht den allgemeinen Grundsatz im Ihram, vorsichtig und respektvoll gegenüber den Geboten zu sein. Es verbindet sich gut mit der gesamten Thematik, dass das Einhalten der Einschränkungen während des Ihram eine Form der Hingabe und des Respekts gegenüber Allah ist. The first view is that it is allowed and permissible to comb your hair while in Ihram. This is supported by the evidence we saw earlier, where Aisha, Ra, was permitted to comb her hair during her Ihram state. So, according to this view, there's nothing prohibited about it. The second view, however, is that it is actually haram or forbidden. This is the stance taken by some of the Hanafis. They hold that combing may lead to unnecessary acts or risks that are not appropriate during Ihram, which is a sacred state requiring special observance. The third view considers combing to be makruh, which is disliked but not outright prohibited. This perspective is followed by the Shafi'is and Hanbalis. They argue that combing might expose the pilgrim to the risk of hair falling out, which is problematic because in Ihram, we're supposed to avoid actions that could cause this. To support this, An-Nawawi mentioned in Al-Majmu that it is makruh for the pilgrim in Ihram to comb his hair and beard, since it's more likely to cause hair to fall out. Similarly, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin explained that the pilgrim in Ihram should generally avoid combing because it can lead to hair loss. Instead, he emphasized that washing the head is acceptable, but combing can increase the risk of hair falling, which is best avoided during this sacred state. So, in essence, the key point here is that there are different scholarly opinions. Some permit combing, others see it as forbidden, and some consider it disliked due to the potential risks involved. Connecting this to our overall understanding of Ihram, it's important to be cautious and follow the guidance that aligns with your school of thought or personal conviction.